That day, everything changed. The morning sun rose over Ouagadougou, casting long, golden beams over a capital cloaked in uneasy calm. From the moment the jet landed at the military wing of the international airport, the atmosphere grew electric. The aircraft bore no national flag, only a faded insignia barely visible on its tail. The pilot didn't speak to air traffic control in French, English, or any language the Burkina authorities recognized. And when the door opened, out stepped not a diplomat, but a courier, cloaked in black, handcuffed to a steel briefcase. He was escorted silently through corridors flanked by armed guards, past officers and intelligence analysts who avoided his gaze. The briefcase bore a seal, 3 concentric red circles, known only to a handful of intelligence operatives on the African continent. It was the unmistakable emblem of the North Korean Supreme Command. Inside the office of Ibrahim Traoré, the man who had captured a continent's imagination and ignited controversy across the globe, the letter sat unopened. Traoré, dressed in his usual fatigues and a black beret, circled it like a predator, unsure of its prey. He had received many messages since taking power, but none like this. He could feel the weight of the paper even before he touched it. When he finally broke the seal, the words inside sent chills down his spine. Comrade Traoré, we have watched your rise with admiration. Our people understand the burden of isolation and the price of dignity. Let us not remain islands. Together, we can forge a new axis of resistance. We offer the hand of brotherhood and the tools of power. Let us talk, your land, your resources, our knowledge, our strength, yours in solidarity, Kim Jong Un. The room was silent. The weight of that proposal was enormous. In the grand halls of diplomacy, it would have echoed like thunder. But Traoré was no ordinary statesman. A soldier by training, a revolutionary by conviction, he was a man driven not by protocol, but by principle, or so he claimed. He walked to the balcony of the presidential palace and stared over the city. In the streets below, vendors hawked mangoes and grilled meat, children ran barefoot chasing soccer balls, and elders gathered under neem trees to debate politics and fate. None of them knew that history had just knocked on their door. Elsewhere, in Paris, Washington, and Berlin, intercepted chatter triggered silent alarms. Cyber analysts flagged unusual metadata traveling between Pyongyang and Ouagadougou. At first, it seemed like noise, but then came the satellite images, movements near Kaya, home to one of the continent's richest uranium deposits, infrastructure appearing overnight, tents with unfamiliar shapes, communications blackouts. A confidential report revealed what many feared. North Korea was not just watching, they were moving. But what he didn't know was that this was not a message of solidarity. It was bait. A meeting was convened in the capital under strict secrecy. Around a long oval table sat Traoré's closest military advisors, intelligence chiefs, and economic ministers. The letter had been copied and translated into 3 languages, encrypted into digital form, then wiped from all known systems. "Do we respond?" asked Colonel Zita, head of military intelligence. Traoré didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on a map on the far wall, a relief of West Africa's mineral veins, crisscrossing Burkina Faso like arteries of buried fire. Uranium, gold, manganese, all this wealth, and yet they remained shackled to foreign banks, beholden to multilateral institutions that preached growth while demanding austerity. "We don't just respond," he said, "we redefine the game." Across the world, interpretations varied. France accused Traoré of courting instability. American diplomats, already jittery over the growing anti-Western sentiment in the Sahel, pressed for sanctions. But in Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran, interest grew. They saw potential in the young leader who defied convention, who challenged the West not with words alone, but with action. Weeks passed. The skies over Ouagadougou remained silent, but underground, momentum built. A hidden airstrip in the northern province was repaved. Communications lines were scrambled. A discreet delegation of North Korean engineers and scientists arrived under the guise of agricultural cooperation. To the people, little had changed. Yet beneath the surface, an alliance was being forged in whispers and handshakes. Meanwhile, whispers turned to evidence. A second satellite captured containers marked with obscure Korean symbols being offloaded under military guard. Thermal imaging showed a facility near the Taparco mine operating well past midnight. Local villagers spoke of fences, drones, and armed patrols. The pattern was unmistakable. Something was being built, and it wasn't a hospital. Inside the Ministry of Security, an encrypted dossier arrived from an unknown sender. It contained a single sentence: Project Dambe has begun. Traoré recognized the name immediately. Dambe was not just a code name. It was an old West African martial art, a philosophy of resistance, resilience, and honor. To name a nuclear project after it, that was a statement. In the privacy of his residence, Traoré met with his most trusted advisor, Saran, a former guerrilla fighter turned strategist. "What do we gain if we move forward?" he asked. "Leverage," she replied. "A seat at the table where we've only ever been on the menu. And if we fail? They'll bury us, but at least we'll be buried standing." He nodded, and for the first time in weeks, permitted himself a rare smile. Outside, the night was quiet, but the world had begun to stir. A confidential report leaked to the international press hit global airwaves like a thunderclap. Burkina Faso in nuclear pact with North Korea. The implications were staggering. Overnight, the nation became the focal point of debate in parliaments and newsrooms across the globe. Al Jazeera aired a panel titled Africa's New Power Play. On one side, former diplomats warned of a new axis of rogue states. On the other, Pan-African scholars argued that Burkina Faso was finally asserting its sovereignty. "Western nations built their empires on the backs of African minerals," one guest declared. "Why can't an African nation build its future with its own hands?" But the backlash was swift. France recalled its ambassador. The US imposed targeted sanctions on Traoré's inner circle. The IMF suspended loan negotiations. Burkina Faso's economy, already fragile, began to shudder under the weight of sudden isolation. In the capital, protests erupted, some fueled by fear, others by fiery patriotism. In the Place de la Révolution, crowds gathered chanting, "Liberté ou rien," freedom or nothing. Traoré addressed the nation with the calm of a general and the cadence of a poet. "They say we are dangerous, that we threaten the world. But what they fear is not our weapons. It is our independence. For decades, they offered us crumbs. Now that we reach for the loaf, they call us criminals." Inside the new base being constructed under Project Dambe, Korean engineers worked side by side with African technicians. Language barriers were broken with shared grit and nods of mutual respect. But tension simmered. Not all Burkinabe soldiers approved of the alliance, and not all Koreans trusted their hosts. A drone, likely American, buzzed across the sky and vanished just as quickly. Security was heightened. Underground chambers were reinforced. The uranium enrichment equipment was scheduled to arrive in stages, each piece disguised as agricultural or mining machinery. Back in Washington, a private meeting was held in the West Wing. The Secretary of Defense issued a chilling assessment. If Burkina Faso completes this deal, it becomes a precedent. Every disillusioned nation in Africa, Asia, and South America will consider doing the same. The dominoes don't fall in Europe anymore. They fall in Ouagadougou. In that moment, Burkina Faso became more than a nation. It became a symbol. Within weeks, surveillance intensified. US satellites doubled their passes. Israeli Mossad sent operatives into neighboring Niger. France expanded its intelligence network in the region, reactivating Cold War-era listening posts. In the shadows, a quiet war was beginning. Inside the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, a special session convened. Traoré's representatives delivered a fiery address, accusing the West of hypocrisy and warning against interference. Some leaders applauded, others sat in uneasy silence. Back in Ouagadougou, the city buzzed with speculation. Graffiti declaring "Dambe ka dignité" spread across alley walls and market stalls. Songs were written. University debates became battlegrounds of ideology. A generational rift began to show. Youth rallied behind Traoré, while the older elite feared retribution from the global order. Saran advised restraint. "Every move we make must be calculated. We are not just playing a game. We are writing our legacy." But restraint was becoming harder to maintain. A convoy transporting nuclear materials disguised as construction supplies was intercepted in Ghana. The international media erupted. Though the convoy was released under diplomatic pressure, the incident confirmed what the world already suspected. Project Dambe was real. The UN Security Council held an emergency meeting. A resolution was drafted to sanction Burkina Faso and demand inspections. Russia and China abstained. The vote passed, Traoré refused. "Let them come," he said, "but they will not dictate to us what we do on our land." Behind the scenes, North Korea encouraged defiance. More advisors arrived, secure channels buzzed with encrypted plans. Construction of a new underground site near Bobo Dioulasso accelerated. But cracks were forming. A whistleblower from within the military leaked footage of inhumane working conditions at the new facility. Videos of exhausted laborers, radioactive exposure, and aggressive foreign overseers sparked outrage. Traoré addressed the nation again. This time, his tone was somber. "We walk a dangerous path, but I swear to you, we will not become the monsters they expect. We will build with honor, or not at all." Though government-controlled media attempted to spin the footage as enemy propaganda, the images were too damning to ignore. Social media flooded with outrage. Influencers and journalists who had once supported Traoré now demanded transparency. The hashtag #DambeTruth trended across Francophone Africa. In response, Traoré authorized an internal investigation and granted limited access to selected African media outlets. For the first time, cameras entered the facility, not the classified lower levels, but enough to show clean laboratories and well-treated engineers. Still, it wasn't enough. International pressure mounted. The African Union dispatched a special envoy. ECOWAS, long skeptical of Traoré's leadership, demanded accountability. China offered silent diplomatic backing, but withheld further support pending the investigation's outcome. Saran met with Traoré late one evening on the palace rooftop. The city glowed below, but the light in her eyes was sharp. "They're turning on you," she said. "I expected the West to," he replied. "Not just them, our people, your base. Even the unions are whispering. I thought we were building something sacred. We are. But if it costs us our soul, what's the point?" In an unexpected move, Traoré invited leaders of the opposition and civil society to a televised forum. It was unprecedented, a sitting revolutionary leader offering to share the stage with his critics. They debated under glaring lights, with the whole nation watching. Traoré defended Project Dambe as a symbol of African resurgence, but admitted missteps. His opponents demanded oversight, civilian safety, and a re-evaluation of North Korean involvement. The forum ended with applause and silence. No immediate answers, no resolution. But something had changed. A dialogue had begun. Meanwhile, foreign intelligence agencies shifted strategy. No longer content with surveillance, they began funneling money to dissident groups within Burkina Faso. A sudden surge of unexplained violence hit the north. Ambushes, sabotage, and whispers of a coup. General Coulibaly, once a staunch ally of Traoré, demanded emergency powers to stabilize the situation. "Too convenient," Saran warned. Traoré agreed. Coulibaly was stripped of command and placed under house arrest. But the damage was done. A rift had opened within the regime. And in the shadows, the letter that had started it all sat in a sealed case in the presidential archive, still intact, still pulsing with the weight of a promise or a curse. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in chaos management. Traoré tightened security around key ministries and military installations. A new intelligence unit was created, Task Force Sankara, charged with rooting out foreign influence and internal sabotage. Arrests followed, some legitimate, others questionable. Fear began to creep through the capital, and then came the blackout. One night, the entire northern grid went dark. Kaya, Fada, even parts of Ouagadougou lost power. Communications severed, internet silent. For 12 hours, the nation teetered on the edge. When the lights came back on, they revealed the damage. A series of synchronized attacks on transformer stations, believed to be the work of a foreign-trained insurgent group, left hundreds wounded and dozens dead. It was a message. One Traoré received clearly. He called an emergency cabinet session. Saran, visibly exhausted, entered with a thick dossier. This was coordinated, multiple cells, insider knowledge, and it's spreading. "Then we meet fire with fire," Traoré replied. A new decree was issued. All foreign NGOs operating in sensitive zones were to halt activities pending a full security review. Western governments condemned the move. But within the country, many applauded. To them, it was a return to control. Meanwhile, Project Dambe continued underground. Literally, new tunnels were dug. Anti-surveillance technology was imported from China. A third wave of North Korean engineers arrived through a circuitous route via Iran. But it was no longer just about nuclear power. Plans expanded to include missile technology, cyber warfare capabilities, and advanced radar systems. Traoré was no longer playing defense. He was preparing for a long war. At night, he barely slept. He walked the halls of the palace, rereading Sankara's speeches, searching for clues, for guidance. One quote echoed louder than the rest. "You cannot carry out fundamental change without a certain amount of madness." Was he mad? Or was he simply the only one willing to do what others feared? A knock at the door. Saran, again. "There's someone you need to see. She's from Mali. Claims to represent a coalition. A new bloc of nations ready to stand with us, publicly. And what's the catch? She wants dambe expanded, shared." He looked out at the night sky. For the first time, he saw more than stars. He saw satellites. The envoy from Mali arrived under the codename Jiguia, Hope. A former academic turned strategist, Aminata Konaré spoke with calm authority, her presence at once disarming and formidable. Her message was clear: the region was ready for a union of the willing. Not a military alliance, but a technological consortium focused on sovereignty and defense. She came bearing signatures from interim governments in Mali, Guinea, and Niger. All had been ostracized by the West. All were rich in minerals, and all wanted in on Project Dambe. Traoré listened as she laid out the vision: shared facilities, cross-border infrastructure, regional satellite systems, and a trans-Sahelian defense council. "No more waiting for Paris or Washington to decide our fate," she said. "It's time we decide our own." Saran was skeptical. "We can't even secure our northern provinces. You want us to supervise a regional nuclear grid?" But Traoré saw more than a challenge. He saw a legacy. "We'll call it the Kanku Musa Accord," he said, "Africa's answer to the NATO of sanctions and manipulation." The deal was inked within days, quietly, strategically. No press conference, just encrypted signatures, sealed agreements, and the quiet hum of a new axis taking shape. But word leaked. Within hours, Washington issued a new sanctions package. France, citing national security, deployed naval assets to monitor the Gulf of Guinea. A carrier strike group was mobilized. The world was no longer watching from afar. It was circling. Inside the African Union, panic brewed. Nigeria expressed alarm. Ghana threatened to close its borders. South Africa offered to mediate. The continent itself was dividing. At home, Traoré's popularity surged among the youth but dipped among the business elite. Foreign investments froze. Prices rose. The black market flourished. But none of it deterred the construction. In a hidden chamber below the original dambe facility, engineers unveiled the core, a compact mobile reactor. It was not yet weaponized, but it was real. A North Korean advisor approached Traoré with a hard case. Inside, schematics, a missile platform compatible with dambe's payload. "No more theory," the advisor said. "This is implementation." Traoré took the documents and dismissed the room. Alone, he examined every line, every calculation. Hours passed. Then, a single word escaped his lips: "I understand." The next morning, Traoré summoned his senior cabinet to a secure underground chamber known only to a handful. There, beneath layers of concrete and steel, he outlined a vision more audacious than anything they'd expected. "Dambe will not just be a shield," he said. "It will be a statement, a line in the sand." He spoke of deterrence, of a world where African states were no longer reactive but the ones defining the rules of engagement. No more conditional aid, no more humiliating diplomacy. "We will speak from a place of power, not petition." His speech was met with silence, then nods. Hesitant at first, then firm, but not all agreed. Minister of Finance Isufu raised his hand. "Mr. President, we are courting disaster. A single misstep and we risk annihilation." Traoré's eyes didn't flinch. "Then we make no missteps." Outside, the dambe facility began radiating more than heat. The hum of energy was matched by the thrum of tension. Word spread fast. Even without official announcements, the world knew what was coming. Israel quietly offered intelligence cooperation to the West African bloc. Iran sent envoys offering missile calibration. Brazil and Venezuela opened back channels. The world was rearranging. A new map was forming, not of borders, but of allegiances. Inside the presidential residence, Traoré sat with his son, a boy no older than 8. They played chess. "Papa, why are the white pieces always first?" Traoré smiled, a shadow in his eyes. "Because someone long ago said so, but maybe it's time the board was flipped." At that moment, a call came in. "Mr. President," said a breathless aide, "the test is ready." Traoré stood, kissed his son's forehead, and walked toward history. The test site was carved into the belly of a forgotten plateau in eastern Burkina Faso, chosen for its geological stability and its distance from prying eyes. Access was limited to senior scientists, military engineers, and a handful of trusted aides. As Traoré arrived by armored convoy, he was greeted with stiff salutes and anxious eyes. The countdown had already begun. Below the observation dome, encased in reinforced steel and lead shielding, sat the prototype reactor, compact, efficient, and humming with potential. It was not a bomb, not yet. But it was a power source capable of nuclear propulsion, satellite launches, and, if fully configured, a viable warhead core. The symbolic weight was unmistakable. Traoré approached the control station. The lead engineer, a quiet man of Congolese descent named Ngoma, presented the activation tablet. "You may initiate the pulse, sir. 30 seconds to detonation. Subcritical. No fallout." Traoré placed his finger on the screen. "No speeches," he said. He pressed. The chamber vibrated. A faint tremor, followed by a burst of electric light, visible only through specialized optics. The data streamed in. Thermal spikes, radiation containment, power output. Everything was within parameters. Inside the control room, silence fell, then applause. Ngoma nodded. "It works." The next day, satellite footage confirmed unusual thermal activity in eastern Burkina Faso. Within minutes, analysis units in Langley, Tel Aviv, and Brussels reached the same conclusion: nuclear ignition. It wasn't a weapon, but it was close. The world erupted. France called for an immediate intervention. The US demanded Traoré step down. The UN Security Council convened an emergency session where vetoes flew like missiles. Russia and China blocked punitive resolutions. A stalemate. But on the ground, the stakes were anything but frozen. In Ouagadougou, millions marched, some in fear, many in pride. Young people painted murals of Traoré with uranium atoms swirling in halos around his head. L'Afrique se lève became a national chant. Schools revised their civics curriculum overnight, but Traoré was not celebrating. In the quiet of his war room, he reviewed new intelligence. NATO had rerouted assets to West Africa. A strike was possible. A digital sabotage operation was likely already underway. He called Saran. "We have 72 hours before something breaks." "Then let's break it ourselves," she said. "No," he replied. "We're not here to break. We're here to reshape." He turned to his generals. "Prepare the broadcast." "What will you tell the world?" one asked. Traoré looked into the camera lens being readied for transmission and said, "The truth." The broadcast began not with fire, but with silence, a black screen. Then Traoré's face appeared, not under the weight of ceremony, but framed by simplicity. A single flag behind him, his uniform crisp, his eyes calm. "To the people of the world," he began, "I speak not as a threat, but as a mirror. If you fear what Burkina Faso has become, then perhaps you must ask what your world has made inevitable." He spoke of history, of colonization, extraction, betrayal. He laid bare the hypocrisy of global powers who spoke of peace while hoarding weapons. He explained Project Dambe in detail, not as an act of aggression, but as a claim to dignity. "We are not children of war. We are children of survival. And now we claim our future." He paused. "There will be no nuclear weapons launched from our soil. But make no mistake, we will no longer be defenseless. Our uranium will not light Parisian lamps while our villages remain dark. It will power Africa's rise." The broadcast cut across continents. In living rooms, war rooms, and diplomatic chambers, it played without censorship. Something about its clarity, its refusal to blink, demanded to be heard. In the aftermath, something unexpected happened. Protests erupted in Europe, in America, not against Traoré, but against their own governments. Justice for Africa became a rallying cry among students and activists. Traoré's words appeared in graffiti on Berlin's walls, in Manhattan subways, in Tokyo's side streets. UN observers called it the Burkina doctrine, a blueprint for self-determined development in the post-colonial world. Weeks passed. The carrier groups lingered, but they did not strike. A fragile line held. Inside the dambe compound, scientists pivoted towards civilian applications, medical isotopes, energy research, aerospace programs. The missile blueprints remained locked away. Saran returned to the village where she'd been born. She planted a neem tree and wept. Traoré stood before a newly built university, funded not by foreign donors, but by mineral revenues redirected from elite contracts. Its motto, inscribed in stone, "Knowledge is resistance." As he watched students enter its gates, he whispered to no one in particular, "Africa no longer has a choice. It must rise again. And this time, it would not rise alone." If this story lit a fire in you, if you're done with the silence, the sanctions, and the double standards, then don't just watch, take a stand. Hit that subscribe button, because Africa is not waiting for permission anymore. We are writing our own stories, we are building our own power. And this channel, it's part of that revolution. So if you believe in sovereignty, in unity, in a future where Africa leads, then join us. Subscribe, share, speak up. The time for awakening is over. Now, it's time to rise.